Hello everyone. I have noticed videos or recordings popping up regarding New World and whether or not it will die. People have commented on these videos and recordings that it's too early to discuss this, and I disagree. I will do my best to explain. Before I get onto what's on the screen, let me talk about the two-way street when it comes to games. There are many factors when it comes to the success of a game. One of those factors is recognizing that the community needs to support the game and the devs need to support the community and the game. That's what the two-way street is. You need the devs and the community together to make the game successful. Among other factors, of course, but that is a major factor. There's a good example of this out there, Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2 has been around for 9 whole years, and it is still going strong. Whether or not you would consider its population to be good or not is a completely different matter, but it has kept alive for 9 years, and it is getting its next expansion in February. That is a good example of the two-way street working really well. That said, I can now move into all the discussion, starting with the post I have up on the screen. If you want, at the end of the video, or recording, I can go into depth about Linux if you want, but the point that I would like to get to here is that Amazon Game Studios, or whoever is responsible for New World, apparently refuses to open support for Linux. This is a request by the community, and they are saying no. That two-way street I just mentioned earlier, this is an example of that not being a two-way street. If the community wants it, then the devs should do it. If the devs don't want to do it for a certain reason, then they should specify that reason for the community to be able to either educate them or offer a suggestion in place of it. The other reason that this post is of concern is the whole easy anti-cheat thing. Let me tab over. Okay, it is right here. Okay. I want to focus on this highlighted text, which says, starting with the latest SDK release, Software Developer Kit, for those who do not know the abbreviation, developers can activate anti-cheat, support for Linux via Wine, or Proton with just a few clicks. Keyword, a few clicks. This means that activating this support for the community is as easy as a few clicks. And this is from Easy Anti-Cheat themselves, the developers of Easy Anti-Cheat. If they're saying it's this easy, then it should be that easy for Amazon Studios to flip that switch. But it's clear that they don't want to flip that switch. If they can't be bothered to flip one switch, then that tells you they can't be bothered to do a lot of things. That's my warning sign 1 and 2. Warning sign 3 that this game is on its way to an early grave is a lot of the things that I was mentioning in my past recordings, ranging from how screwed up the experience gains are from crafting all the way up to the travel system. This game has just so many things wrong with it. It's very clear that they didn't plan it well. I think the only reason that this game saw success is because of all the streamers involved with this game that were hyping it up and getting people to join. I think that is really the main driving factor. Maybe a supporting factor is people were hyped for it before it even came out. I guess maybe that would be another factor too, but either way, that hype is going to die down. And if this game doesn't do something to keep the game alive, that hype's going to die down and people are going to move on. They really need to get this game in shape. It's clear that this was not ready for release, with how poorly planned it was. That's warning sign 3. Now warning sign 4. Battlefield 2042 was supposed to release this month, but then it got pushed back to November 19th. When that happens, a lot of the streamers that drove a good portion of the hype and people to the game are going to move on to Battlefield, because that's what a lot of people do in that particular world, is they chase the next hype train, and they ride that hype train for the viewers, follows, whatever, up until the next time that another hype starts. That's usually how it goes. It's very rare that you find, well, very rare in comparison to certain scenarios, that you will find people who stick with a game for long periods and stream it exclusively for long periods of time. Look at World of Warcraft. Eventually people stopped playing it and moved on to Final Fantasy. That's a good example right there. Yeah, I think those are probably some of the best points to bring up. I can deviate now into a Linux discussion, and I could perhaps bring up some theories that I have regarding the New World team and maybe why they don't want to turn on Easy Anti-Cheat. Before I do that, though, I will explain what Linux is. Linux is an operating system that's free and open sourced. For those who aren't familiar with the term operating system, that is going to include Windows, Mac, and that group. Meaning it's an operating system that you can use for a variety of tasks. Open sourced, well, there's plenty of definitions for open source, but the point of Linux is that it allows developers to study and make modifications as necessary. It's not like Windows, where it's proprietary and that you need permissions to do certain things. Linux bypasses that whole permission necessity for pretty much everything on the operating system. That means you're free to tinker with it as you need. For those who are probably thinking, oh, I haven't heard of Linux before, well, you actually have. You may not realize this, for those people and people who are familiar with Linux, that there are, I guess you can say, distant relatives of Linux. They're going to be Android phones and PlayStation. These are both devices that were created using Linux. I don't know if PlayStation 5 continues to use Linux, but I know from watching videos of people jailbreaking earlier PlayStations that the Linux operating system did appear during the jailbreak. That is how involved Linux is. It's in all of the devices that you can think of that you've touched. And even before then, if you're not from the earlier generation, Linux servers were used to give Windows to people in the very early days of the 90s when floppy disks were a thing. Yeah, that is how old Linux is. It has plenty of family members, if you will. And they continue to live on well past the early days. But anyways, that's Linux. Now I can talk about my theories regarding the New World developers. Theory 1. I have noticed that Linux has the wrong image in the eyes of developers, in that they think that the cheaters and hackers will get worse if they allow support to Linux. That is incorrect, for the most part, because people will cheat if they want to cheat. You aren't stopping that. But another thing, too, to realize is that even if it's easier to cheat on Linux, it's as equally easy to stop. Here's why. Because Linux is open source, as I mentioned, it would be possible to create software to detect cheats in areas that currently any software can't detect right now. A good example of this is Call of Duty. In Call of Duty, what some cheaters will do is they'll have their cheat on another computer, and then they will pull that cheat from their local area connection, meaning that internet cable that connects them to the other PCs is the most oversimplified thing. Because it's pulling the cheat from another computer, the anti-cheat is not going to detect it because it doesn't have the ability to scan that portion of the computer or software, however you wish to word it. Because Linux is open source, it would be possible to create internal software on Linux's end rather than the game end to detect that kind of stuff. That's where I'm going with. So, theory 1. Theory 2. Theory 2 is that another, I guess you can say, gross mischaracterization is that developers think that if they do open support to Linux, it will add to the development's time and costs. That is incorrect as well. One of the many things that you'll learn about the Linux community is they are very good about figuring out workarounds. And you will notice that if you read any posts from people trying to game on Linux. These people are crazy good at figuring out a way around the problem, and then once they figure out the problem, they share that stepping process with everyone else so everyone else can benefit. You would be amazed at the things that the Linux community comes up with just to game on it. It's unfortunate that there hasn't been more communities, or community and I guess company support, because up to this point, Easy Anti-Cheat, NVIDIA, and Steam are the only 3 companies supporting Linux. Gaming, anyways. Theory 3 is going to be... trying to think about how to explain this. That they are worried about privacy and other things. Because it is much easier to, I guess you can say, crack files, then it's much easier to figure out other things regarding the game. Technically true, Linux does have a open source approach, so there are certain things that you can access that you wouldn't normally access on Windows. But the problem is that it's only one portion of the issue. You see, even if somebody could crack the files, they would still have to crack the files from Steam's end as well, because in order to game on Linux right now, you would need either Lutris or Proton, and Proton is the easier of the 2 solutions, which means that if we tech people were to ask people to game on Linux more, then more than likely we would focus on games using Proton, because we don't want people to go through that trouble of using Lutris. But either way, you would have to also crack Proton, which is Steam's software, and I don't think that that's going to be very easy to do. But cracking a file that's on Linux may be possible, and I wouldn't discount it, but keep in mind that it's only one key of 2, as is how you have to look at it. Those are my theories regarding the New World developers, based on my experiences with past developers. Whether or not they are like that is to be determined, but given that seems to be the constant, then I would assume that they're probably like that as well. Either way, though. Okay, I'll deviate into a little bit of a Linux discussion for people who wish to learn more and try to understand what I said in the earlier parts of this recording. Okay, so I mentioned Linux is a free open-sourced operating system, but I didn't touch on Proton and Lutris. Let me tab over. Okay, Proton is a software on Steam's end that allows you to play Steam games through Linux. You can go to this website here to see statistics and figure out if the game works for you. From here, you would get a good picture of everything because of how awesome they are with their statistics, user reports, and things of that nature. So I would recommend visiting this website if you want to see more about gaming on Linux. But that's how you have to think about it, is Proton is the gaming software from Steam. Lutris, which I don't have a page up for, Lutris is going to be a software created on the Linux end. It's not part of Steam or the other ones. It's its own entity. Lutris is something you would download, and it would run the games for you. Kind of like how Proton does for Steam. It's a more complicated process than Proton, as I was mentioning, so generally speaking, I won't recommend it. But that's the crash course on Lutris and Proton. Let me talk about distributions now, once I tab over. Okay. When it comes to Linux, I would say a good portion of people refer to Linux operating systems as distributions because Linux is like a big old family tree. You have tons of different versions of Linux that come in all different designs and flavors, if you will. A distribution refers to a single type of Linux. I've brought up an example here, and that's Manjaro. Manjaro is one of maybe 500 different distributions. That's how many different Linux distributions are out there. There's quite literally hundreds of them. Some are private, some are public. For example, there's TEN, just spelled normally, T-E-N. TEN was created by the United States Air Force as part of a joint project with NASA. That's going to be a much more private distribution of Linux, but Manjaro is public and a couple of other ones. As you can see, there's going to be different ones ranging from ones good for gaming all the way up to ones that are lighter weight for laptops. Manjaro is the one that I would normally recommend to people who are first-time gamers or new to Linux, as I think it's the easiest to use distribution. I've said this before in my past recordings, but basically Manjaro is going to give you as close to a Windows feel as you can get with the Linux distributions because all the buttons are in the exact same spot, and I'll show you in a minute. But also because Manjaro, at least the Plasma edition of Manjaro, not XFCE, but the one below it, appears to have the fewest issues in making games work. If you read the reports from ProtonDB, you will see which operating system and which hardware is being used for that report, meaning that they'll list the distribution they are on and they will list which video card that is, whether it's NVIDIA or AMD video card. But Manjaro Plasma Edition, as far as I can tell, has the least issues. But yes, this is the one I would normally recommend for first-timers. But I'll end the recording by going to show you my desktop. I don't mind showing my desktop, but some other parts of this computer I don't want to show you because privacy reasons. I use this for very sensitive account information like banking and stuff, so I don't want to show you too much. But I will show you my desktop at the very least so you understand Manjaro specifically. Okay, let's see. So we need properties, desktop plasma. Okay. Just don't tab that. I guess it's not going to show my toolbar. I guess I need a bigger thing. But either way, this is what Manjaro's desktop looks like. At least the latest version. If you have an earlier version, it's not going to look like this. But The start button's in the bottom left, just like Windows. All of your information, I guess you can call it, such as your internet connection and stuff, is in the bottom right, just like Windows. There is a clipboard in the bottom right to show you your history and other things. You can clear that out at any time or leave it up and grab things from there. Your File Explorer is to the right of the Start button, which is in the bottom left, same as Windows. The only difference is how you use your desktop. As you can see, I do have some shortcuts here. I have a picture of the New World prefixes and affixes list here on the desktop, as well as a shortcut to Steam, but as far as everything else is concerned, I leave those in the File Explorer. That's one thing that you'll find differently, is that when it comes to Linux, it organizes your desktop folders into one folder using the File Explorer equivalent. But other than that, everything... Oh, well, actually, I guess the software. Yeah, I was about to say, I think everything else is the same, but no, it's actually the software too. I've gotten so used to using Manjaro, I forgot about that. But as far as downloading software, such as GIMP, Discord, or the others, you would do that through the Software Update Center, which on this Manjaro version is next to the File Explorer, question mark? Yeah. So there are two icons to the right of your File Explorer, which is to the right of your Start button, and that's going to be Firefox, which is the default web browser for Linux in general. Yeah, so that comes after the File Explorer. Then after your Firefox button is the Software and Update Center. That is where you would download GIMP and the others. So on Windows, you would normally download from a website. On Linux, it's completely different. You download it from, well, at least in Manjaro's case, you download it from the Software and Update Center. But that and the desktop are really about the only two changes here. Everything else is going to be pretty straightforward in terms of how to find your Start button, how to find your programs, and all that. It's pretty straightforward. But anyways, that's all I have. Thanks for listening.